Welcome back. Employers are up in arms over the new proposals to contribute to a new housing fund. The Federation of Kenyan Employers, FKE, says this will increase the cost of operations and burden employees. This even as government says this is the best bet to affordable housing for low-income earners in the country. Dennis Otieno reports.
It is an ambitious proposal the Treasury said would be critical in achieving increased home ownership in the country. The plot a key talking point for CS Henry Rotich when he presented his 2018-2019 financial year budget statement. But employers are not taking this lying down.
The announcement by the CS Finance, the Treasury, to introduce what is essentially a tax on housing to be paid by the employers came as a surprise. I think the idea is the funding of the government's initiative and plan as part of the Big Four agenda.
In the plan, Treasury is pushing for the amendment of Section 31 of the Employment Act, which will see employers contribute a maximum of 5,000 shillings to the National Housing Development Fund, as employees contribute 1% of their gross salary.
So we find it difficult to support this proposal at this point because we do not know the parameters, the assessments which were done to arrive at the quantum, what is the direct benefit that each employee will get. Are we guaranteeing that all employees in the formal and informal sector will get the low-cost housing?
In particular, employers are worried about the fate of existing housing units currently in place.
We have the Housing Act, which already talks about a housing fund. What's the difference between this one and the one in the Housing Act? Is it the same?
But Treasury says it means well.
This fund will now be used to develop this affordable housing, and once we get the affordable houses, we will find a way of how the contributors will access it, maybe on a first-come, first-served basis, or a lottery system, like what happens in Ethiopia.
Well, it appears employers and workers have got more questions than answers with regard to the proposed housing scheme. The main concern being the cost implications going forward.
Inaniumiza kwa sababu I'm still earning the same amount of money. So ikikuwa pia taxed hapo, bado nitaendelea kuumia.
The problem we have with any project by the government is now the corruption. Because, okay, it's good they're coming with that scheme, but which kind of people will get it?
It seems that there is concerted effort to push most of these costs to business and to employers.
According to the National Housing Corporation, Kenya's housing deficit currently stands at 2 million units, but the country can only produce a paltry 50,000 units every year. Dennis Otieno, Citizen TV.
And now joining us to delve further into this issue is Dixon Wanjohi, the General Manager of MIGA, a development project under Home Africa. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
I'd like to start by the Kenyans are really concerned about this housing development fund, where formal employment, if you're in formal employment, you're expected to contribute 0.5% of your gross pay, while your employer will match up the same, which brings it to 1%. This towards a Kenya Housing Development Fund. What is your take about this?
Basically, myself, I'd like to say that I'm in support of this fund. Reason being that it's going to work as the same as the pension funds that we have currently. One of the reasons, I have 3 reasons why I'm in support of it. One of it is going to be to act as some form of capital mobilization for the building developers. The second one is going to de-risk all the contractors. And the third one is it will be enabling the homeowners. Basically, when I talk about enabling homeowners, it will enable all the workers to be able to afford the houses. Yes.
But does it not matter if I am going to contribute to this? What guarantee is there that I will be able to get a house? Because once the government is done with the low-cost housing,
yes.
what options do they have to ensure that as a contributor I'm able to gain from this fund going forward? For pension, one gains.
Yes.
For NHIF, one gains.
I know I know the government, when it was coming up with this fund, because it has always been there, they have come up with structures which are going to work on this. We believe that if we contribute the 0.5% or the 1% to this fund, the money is not just going to be sitting there. We're going to be earning interest. So that's the reason why I'm saying it's going to work the same as the pension funds. Yeah.
Okay, and the proposal also to increase import duty.
Yes.
From 25 to 35%,
yes.
So that the local manufacturers of iron and steel can be able to benefit and be competitive.
Yes.
Is this bound to have any positive impact in the construction sector?
It is. The reason being is it's in support of the local manufacturing sector. We believe that we can be able to even be able to buy cheaply locally. Mm-hmm. And this registration of bringing down the import duty or increasing the import duty on the imported goods, it's going to work.
In regards to the Housing Development Fund, our guest is Dixon Wanjohi, and we were just discussing this fund and looking at what impact will it be able to have. Will Kenyans be able to, are they okay with it, the 0.5 or 1%, depending on how you look at it, towards a contribution towards that fund? And now there's been this issue of mortgages where Kenyans are not able to afford mortgages, where now the government has set up the Kenya Mortgage Refinance Company to make mortgage affordable to Kenyans. How will this fund work, and what should we expect? Should there be an improvement in the mortgage uptake?
Okay, basically there will be an improvement in the Kenya mortgage, the mortgages that we've been having, because basically the main aim of the Kenya Mortgage Refinance Company is basically to grow the mortgage finance market. Basically, it's going to finance the medium to long-term liquidity for the affordable housing pillar. The other thing that there is going to be an improvement. Remember, the Kenya Mortgage Refinance Company is going to be managed by the investment bank and SACCOs. So I see as if we'll have some sort of an improvement in the uptake of mortgages in Kenya. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, and before the break, before we moved to State House, we just from discussing the tax measures that have been implemented in order to support the local manufacturers, that being on steel and products. Yes. Once the costs of construction calm down, does this ever translate to the maybe rent or the purchase of when one is trying to buy a house? Do they translate to the consumer?
It does. Because remember, the affordable housing projects, we are looking at houses which are going to be at most from 1.5 million, mm-hmm. which I believe that with the low-cost production of the building materials and with proper registration, we should be able to achieve this, and it will translate to the local mwananchi on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are you as a developer, are you contented with the tax measures that were put in place by the Cabinet Secretary in order to either grow the housing sector or just to help you as a developer and also consumers who are interested in having their own houses? Or do you feel there are other issues that could have been put?
I feel like it's going to work, mm-hmm. even in the private sector. But there are other things that we have to look at, like registration. We need to have proper registration. Basically in terms of approvals, in terms of the cost of materials, of building materials, and all such things.
Okay. Yeah. Because we'd already discussed about the iron and the steel products, yes. Let's just go back to the 0.5 charge. Was there public, you know, the government says there's public participation, but when we're discussing it, when we've had people from Nyeri County talking about how they're not contented, also in the story that was just able to air from Dennis Otieno, there's that concern that it's still an amount. Do you feel that there was public participation, or is it something that it's only for the construction industry, not looking at the consumer, and the government just, it's urged to promote the decent and affordable housing where they have to get 6.5 billion shillings into that?
What has happened is there is a task force that was created to look into this. And I believe that there was public participation in this. And we believe that if it's being discussed by Parliament, they should look at the registration itself And if there are any gaps that need to be filled, I guess Parliament should be able to look at that, and we should be good to go.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you are contented with
Yes,
this, and
yes.
But how's been the uptake of the people buying their own houses? How's been the uptake in the country? And yeah, instead of renting, what's the uptake like, especially this year?
This year it's been quite slow, and that's the reason why us as in the private sector, we are saying that it's a good move by the government, so that at least we can increase the market and also the uptake of housing, because if you can look at it's about 5% of Kenyans who own houses. All of us, all the rest, are renting houses. So it's a good thing to see this. If you can be able even to go up to 30% or 40%, to be good.
So this is bound to the new measures, the new tax measure of 0.5. You believe it is achievable?
It is achievable.
In the delivering of the housing,
Yes,
the affordable housing?
It is.